I'm Kerensa Cadenas, and I'm the senior editor at New York Magazine's The Cut, and I'm here with the cast of Freeform's newest show, Cruel Summer, which is going to be your summer binge. You're just going to want to watch it, basically. And so I want to have everyone in the cast introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Allius Barnes, and I play Vincent Fuller on Cruel Summer.
I'm Chiara Aurelia. I play Jeanette Turner on Cruel Summer.
Hi, I am Olivia Holt, and I play Kate Wallis.
Hi, I'm Harley Quinn Smith, and I play Mallory Higgins.
Hi, I'm Froy Gutierrez, and I play Jamie Henson.
Well, I'm so excited to talk about the show with you guys. It's so good. How did you guys get involved with it? And why was it a project that you wanted to pursue and be involved with?
Well, I got an audition, and no, from like the very first time I read it, I don't know. I just really, for some reason, there are those like projects that come around where like immediately you put yourself in those, positions because it just resonates with you in that way. And I felt like that was it for me.
I remember reading the script for the first time and feeling like it was impossible. And there's something so exciting about the potential of doing the impossible, which is something I think we've done. And kind of reading it, there was such a beautiful visual that came into my head as what this could become and the potential that the story, could create. And there's something super exciting about Jeanette to me. And also, the opportunity to work with all of these other characters and incredible actors. It was all around super exciting.
I feel I was so stoked the first time I read the pilot and got the audition because I feel like I'm living in the wrong time, and I would have much rather been alive during the 90s. I was only alive for 1 year in the 90s, and I feel like that was really taken from me.
Very upset about it, everyone.
It's been hard being alive during this time. But I loved it, and it's always been a dream of mine to be on a show in the 90s, and so I immediately was so drawn to it and was so excited for the potential to be a part of it. Now here we are.
Yeah, I remember going into audition for it, and then on the second round, they sent me not only the first episode, but the second one too. And I remember, I just kind of started perusing it, and then by the time I was halfway through it, I was hooked. And I just wanted to keep finishing it, and I wanted to figure out how to do the 3 different years. I was terrified to do it. And usually if you're terrified to do something, that's when you got to try it out. So yeah, I was very on board.
Yeah. Olivia, what about you?
I really loved this show from the beginning. I came on pretty late into the game. So I saw the original pilot. I saw all these guys and I was just blown away. Everyone is beyond talented. And I read the first 2 episodes, and kind of like everybody's been saying, it was just so unique, and there was just something so captivating about it and something so challenging and interesting. And this is one of my favorite genres, so I was stoked all around.
As someone who spent a lot of time in the 90s, because I'm old, I was very excited to see the 90s setting and wanted to know how you guys felt about it. Was there anything, I feel like everybody dresses like they live in the 90s again, which I've before, Brooklyn. But was there anything you felt like that intrigued you about the setting, or there's stuff that came up that like chat rooms or stuff like that you just were like, oh wow, like I'm discovering like all of these new things, like even the sound.
Literally everything about this was amazing. We all listened to 90s music. We all got to dress in 90s clothing. The whole set, everything that was set up, the mall was like traveling back into the 90s. I mean, it was all, I don't know, you guys need to talk about it because it was so cool. Everything to me was so cool. I was like, this is so exciting.
It was just,
and I'm the baby, so I didn't live in the 90s.
Not a baby.
I'm
no baby. I feel like it was so dope. I was so excited when, like, at the end of of the pilot, it's like, and then Garbage's Stupid Girl starts playing, and in episode 2, it's like Zombie by the Cranberries starts playing, and so it's when you read stuff like that, especially if you're a fan of that music like myself, then it's really just it's almost like surreal to have those, like, reading them in the script is just so, it's so magical and cool, and like the references to the films and stuff in that time, and it's just it's so amazing.
Well, I mean, I was so excited to see that a video rental store is going to seem like it plays heavily.
Yeah. Vince literally lives at the video store, basically. So I got to know like ins and outs of a video store pretty well. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, that was cool.
Wait, am I the only one that didn't live in the 90s at all? Out of curiosity, just wondering.
Yeah, baby girl.
No,
Yeah.
You keep us young. You keep us young, Chiara.
I mean,
I was saying though, like, you really feel transported back into that time. Like, whether you lived in the 90s or not, like, you feel like you're back there, from what Harley was saying, like the music or the video store, or I think like from hair, makeup, wardrobe department, props department, set dressing, like every location, it felt like you were in that space. And when watching the show, I think you feel that. And I know that we felt that way too while shooting it. And because it takes place over 3 different years in the 90s, some sets that were recurring for us, set dressing and props and everybody would have to go in and change it to make it fit like that specific year in the 90s. And it was fun. It was like, I mean, I feel like when watching the show, like you feel like you're in that era and you can like really embody and embrace that time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I felt like seeing like Jeanette's transformation, especially that first summer. I was like, oh, why is that everything I wore in junior high? Like the glasses, the big hair, like everything.
Oh, the big hair is everything. I did get slightly made fun of for it sometimes, like maybe like all the time, like maybe like the entire shoot, but it was great. Harley, I did at one point get told by you that my hair reminded you of just like slightly of Hermione Granger in the first Harry Potter.
I mean, one that's like that is a compliment, but I
didn't think it was an insult.
I don't think I said that. I'd say I had so much to say about your 95 wig, as you know. I think Chiara is the absolute hottest babe on the earth with the 95 hair. I mean, always, but the 95 hair like is my personal favorite.
That goes into another question I wanted to ask you guys, is that I think the show is so smart in the way that it transforms your characters both physically and emotionally throughout these like 3 different summers. How was it going through those? Because like even just the way that the show changes from the first summer where it's like really bright and beautiful to like that last summer where it's like very dark and like, you know, down just to the way lighting is in terms of like sets and stuff like that is so interesting. Was that, I mean, I'm guessing that's just like such a great opportunity as actors for you all.
It was definitely interesting to see, because even down to the wardrobe, like for the specific years and how that ties into like, you know, the DP's job and like, you know, the camera work and stuff like that. I thought things like that and elements like that and like how well thought out these things are, you know, like these things that I'm like starting to learn about, you know, like behind the camera and stuff like that. So I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool, like how they tied those things like together. Like, you know what I mean? Like you couldn't wear specific colors because it didn't blend with, you know, the vibe of like a specific year, you know? So it was like challenging, but at the same time, it was really interesting to see how they pulled it together. You know what I mean? Like the crew and like, you know, wardrobe and all those people who are so amazing at their jobs and stuff like that. That was awesome. Yeah.
I think it's the subtle nuances, like the smallest things that will really, in the end, make the biggest difference in differentiating years. I think that it was, you know, there was so much attention to detail, kind of like what Elias said, you know, in the slightest change in the background of the wall in a room, or, you know, in adjustment of a photo or something like that, that makes a huge impact. And those are the little things you can tell that there was like heart and time that went into making those subtle changes that I think will in the end create, you know, what is our year transformation. my favorite part of it was definitely watching everyone else transform. I think like being able to just sit back and be surrounded by this incredible cast that literally I would be working with in a scene in the morning in 93, and then I'd come back and I'd see Harley with her new, bangs in 95, and be it totally in a different space. It was honestly amazing to like witness as a passerby on set than anything.
I feel like too, because there's an entire like mental component as an actor switching through those years, and like a lot of organization in the head that has to happen, at least for me. And I feel like with the physical transformations as well, it definitely helped me be like, okay, I put on this wig, I'm this version of Mallory. I put some pink extensions in, then I'm this version of Mallory. And I feel like that helped with the mental component of it as well.
Well, and how was it like doing that shift though? Like going, like you said, like going from like a morning where you're in the first summer, like 93, and then going to 95 later in the day. Like, what was that kind of process like, shooting and kind of changing into those different versions of your characters?
I think it ultimately came down to communication. And I think all of us had such great communication, from the cast to the creatives, from our producers, like just making sure that we were all in the right headspace before every scene and knowing what the scene was prior or even after. I think all of those little layers were so helpful in embodying the emotion of each year, because each year is so drastically different that I think all of us needed to just really communicate to each other what we needed from each other as well in those scenes, because everybody's in such a different place in each year, and there's lots of different relationships in each year too. So I think just the communication was ultimately, at least for me, what was tremendously helpful.
I was so annoying, I feel, a lot of the time, because I would always be like, before we started anything, I'd be like, can we just talk about this really fast, like to every director and to the directing producer. I was pretty annoying.
You were not annoying.
I come with like my sides, like with so many notes on them, and be like, okay, so this isn't what's here, but this is what I'm thinking. And they'd be like, this is okay. But yeah, I feel like the collaboration in communication was a huge part of it.
I also feel like they gave us a lot of room to make choices and to like play with each other, which is really neat. Like I remember, Max on the pilot really made a choice to not really give us notes, to not really like, I guess, get in the way of us. Like he would set up rehearsals for us just to hang out. He wouldn't even give us like a direction for the character, because he trusted that we would be able to do that. And I think it kind of shows, because we were able to like, even with all of the shooting it during a pandemic, we were able to like have a really good connection with each other. So I thought that was a good.
Max did once literally give us an assignment. He was like, you guys have to hang out for at least 4 hours. We were like, okay. We went into our table read, and he was like, I'm going to go. And we were like, what? Like, don't we have to? And he was like, you guys, he was like, go to lunch. We were like, okay. He was like, just go to lunch. I was like, okay, we're all going to lunch. This is pre-pandemic. But when we were filming the pilot, he was like, go hang out with one another. That was the best rehearsal you can possibly do. And he was so right. I mean, the best part of the show, and what made this so much fun and so easy to do, and made the character so fun to play, was literally just being able to connect with your friends and your coworkers and your cast, and like your family is what we basically all became to one another. And that is what made the whole show. I can't imagine this, being any other way other than like, having the friendships that I do with each and every person in this, community has made this process so much better, so much easier. And I think it really will show through in our work.
We love each other.
Aww.
Yeah.
We do.
So you guys shot the pilot before the pandemic, and then did you shoot the rest of the series like during? How is that? Like, did that like kind of change things? Like, I can't even.
Everybody's like, yes. To answer your question, yeah, we did shoot through the pandemic. But it was great because I don't know. I felt safe. I feel so safe around these people. Everyone's so, everyone's here to protect each other and make sure, we all are healthy and, and safe and like protected, and we can show up to work the next day and get back home safely to our families.
Well, for Olivia and Chiara, I think one thing that I find so interesting about the show is that, I think like a lot of teen shows, like, really, you always have like the mean popular girl and then the like kind of like the kind nerdy girl, and the show like really refuses to box your characters into those like really specific dynamics. How did that inform you guys playing your characters, and did it give you kind of more room to explore their personalities, especially how much like obviously the trauma of Kate's abduction and the fallout of everything with that, kind of informs the ways that you guys change over these 3 different summers?
I think that it's a really important part of our show that I think that we should majorly highlight is that as a teenage girl and as a woman and as, teens today, I think that characters are written and created sometimes very one-dimensionally. And I think that it is possible and very likely to be more than one thing, especially in these huge developmental and times of growth in your life. I mean, you can be nerdy and dorky and popular and sad and confused and depressed and excited. You can be all of those things. You don't have to choose one. You're not just a mean girl or just the nerd. You're a human being. And it's normal to feel a lot of different feelings and go through a lot of different things. Obviously, this is on a much larger scale, and there's, some very traumatic and dramatic parts of our show that, maybe every teen hasn't experienced. But the baseline of just, changing and growing and learning and feeling like a different person and looking in the mirror and potentially not even recognizing yourself after a year of high school is so normal and not unusual at all. And I'm so incredibly like shocked by our writers and so excited by the fact that they gave me and the rest of us the opportunity to play these characters that are so many things, which is another reason why I was so excited by it. I love the opportunity to play Jeanette and in every color and every shade and everything that there is behind what's going on in her head. And I can definitely relate to feeling confused and feeling like there's a lot going on that I don't understand. So that was super exciting and incredible. And I think that we should strive to create more, 3-dimensional characters for women and for people in general.
What about you, Leah?
That was perfectly said. I feel like, riffing off of that, I guess you're right. Like there isn't one character in this show that is just one note. And I think that that's so important to understand and and I think people are going to relate to that. I don't think that and I think through each year, Kate, there's qualities of Kate that Jeanette wants. And then there's qualities of Jeanette that Kate wants. And then there's qualities of Jamie that maybe Kate wants or vice versa. Like there's so many layers to each character. And I think that's what really makes our show so unique is that you're seeing kids actually form their own opinions and evolve and grow and form new relationships and leave relationships behind. And I think that that's such a prominent part of growing up and especially like with the experiences that these kids go through. I think it makes those changes so much more important to shape who they are and to shape like what their future looks like. But it was fun. It was fun to do that, and a really incredible challenge, I think, for all of us. And I learned a lot about myself just by learning who Kate is and figuring out the elements of her that make her her. It was a really good time to do that.
Yeah, Chiara, I love that you brought up the idea of like creating like 3-dimensional like women characters, because I think that's something that is still such a struggle, which seems insane.
Yeah.
I love the way that the show brings up this idea about likability, you know, especially focusing on Jeanette. Like, when that scene is haunted me when you're just like talking about, am I like likable enough? And I think that that's something that goes for like all of the women in this show, you know, it kind of really dives into it, that I think is something that is focused more on like maybe grown up with, you know, women characters and shows, but you know, this idea of likability and the different female characters on this show, I think also is like a really interesting conversation that goes through because like, you know, Mallory seems like very prickly at first, but then you learn so much more about her later through, I don't want to spoil her future friendship with someone that I think shows a whole different side to her. You know, the more we learn about your character, Harley, like I think the more we understand about her, but it's just like a little bit later than.
Yeah, I also think prickly is a hilarious word that I have not heard used from Mallory yet, and I am going to take that. Thank you. But Mallory has a lot going on for sure in her personal life, in her head, and
in your head.
I was literally just thinking that, and I was like, I'm not.
I couldn't help myself. I tried. I really did try. I couldn't do it. I'm so sorry.
It happens. Sometimes the cranberries come out. I also feel like me personally, as Harley, I had a terrible high school experience. I was very much not a cool kid, and so I don't really like to take from my personal experiences when I act, but I do feel like I understood where Mallory was coming from a lot more, because she's not popular or really liked or probably even known by a lot of people. But I think what's cool is when I was in high school, I was not confident at all. I was very much like, I'm scared of everything. But Mallory, even though she's kind of this outcast, is still so confident and is just absolutely herself. And just doesn't really care if people like her or not. She's just living, and they're really, truly the only people she cares about are her friends, and her friends are her world, because she doesn't really have a great family sitch. So it was really, really cool to play a character who's so confident and who's so true to themselves and prickly.
Well, Chiara, what was it like doing that whole like scene when you're talking about like preparing for like Jeanette's like the sense of her not being likable enough to be on trial, which is it's just such a like, again, like I can't get over that. Just like facing the camera.
That was my audition scene. So that was fun. I've done this many times. I think that's something that every single person in this world can struggle with, is the feeling of being likable and the feeling that other people want you to be something other than what you are to satisfy their needs of putting you in a box and making you like explained or making you stereotyped or making you seem like something. And I literally get knots in my stomach just thinking about it, because I've struggled so much with that, of trying to transform myself to make the other people happy, or trying to make myself be a certain way so that, you know, other people feel comfortable around me. And the reality is, like, me as a person, like, I'm very loud and crazy and bubbly, and like, I'm not always what like others would like me to be. And that's great. And that's amazing. And that's what makes me me. And that's what makes me a special person. And I remember doing that scene, and like my heart was so in it, because I knew exactly where she was coming from. They were asking her to transform, no matter, you know, who this other person is. You're asking me to be someone that I'm not. And this is the way I feel. And this is the way that I am going to act right now. And this is the way I'm going to seem right now. And this is the way others are going to perceive me right now, because that's who I am. And she's going through potentially the darkest time in her life. And everyone's like, why can't you just be happy? Why can't you just smile and pretend like everything's fine? Because if you pretend like everything's fine, then other people will feel more comfortable with you. And that is a huge, huge thing that is something that I have tried to shy away from my whole life personally. And I've had a lot of people tell me that, well, if only you did this, or if only you acted like that. But it hurts, and it makes you feel like you're not good enough. And it makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. So I think that focusing on trying to embrace who we are and embrace ourselves and embrace our characters is the best way we can go. Like, Jeanette can learn something from Mallory. You know, she can take a page out of that book and hopefully, allow that to, help her grow. I mean, the truth of Jeanette is that if only she had just allowed herself to feel comfortable in 93 and allowed herself to stay, this sweet, naive, maybe not as cool, maybe not with the perfect guy, but just with friends who cared about her, a family that loved her and like embraced who she was, none of this would have happened. Like this whole journey never would have occurred. It was the need to be something that she was not that has made Cruel Summer, and not the whole show, but I mean, like, has made her journey in Cruel Summer, which is it's a hard pill to swallow. And a lot of people on set would be like, I relate so much to 93 because I was so dorky in high school and I wasn't cool, and I like that so much. And it's so sad because she doesn't like herself, and I wish that she had been able to take a pause and look in the mirror and realize how great she was for who she was, instead of constantly worrying about other people's perceptions of her.
That was beautiful.
That was beautiful. Well, Olivia, I think Kate is so interesting because she almost has like kind of an opposite trajectory, where in the first summer she is like, the most popular girl in school. Like, she is super likable, and it seems like, obviously after all of the trauma she goes through, it's almost a freeing way of her to be able to reject that. Especially, I think, like, it seems like the relationship with her mom is something that seems like it has, just extreme amounts of pressure to put on Kate. How is it kind of like almost working backwards from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of control there, whereas like Jeanette has a father who loves her and wants her to be her, and Kate has a mother who wants her to be more like her. And there's so much control, and I think Kate really struggles with the idea of, is this the right path, like following in my mother's footsteps, or is there something more and something better for me and something more fulfilling for me out there? And I think she's constantly battling with those two ideas of her life. And I think after her traumatic experience, there's a lot that she has to learn. And even I had to educate myself on this because I've never been through anything that traumatic before. And just learning how to gather tools to help you move on from something like that and not let it control your life. And I think she's already had so much control that from her mother, that I think that after this experience, she doesn't want another thing controlling her. And so I think that's why the rebel happens, and why she just embraces this new version of herself, and she owns it, and she doesn't let anybody talk down to her. She doesn't take shit from anybody. She is finally peeling off the layers of herself that she questioned so many times. Yeah. And I think that she finally like feels like she's confident in her own skin and is able to be her true self because she took ownership of herself and ownership of her life and didn't let anybody stop her from being something that she's not.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Froy, in the first 4 episodes, we haven't learned a ton about Jamie yet. But first, our introduction to him is the very shocking scene where he punches Jeanette. Like, how was it kind of going into that? What was it like shooting that? Like, it's so stressful to watch.
Yeah. It's stressful to be in as well. There were multiple scenes in which I was incredibly stressful and uncomfortable shooting them. But it was really great having scene partners in Olivia and Chiara, who both were like, I kept checking on Chiara after every take, being like, "Are you okay? Like, are you all right?" And it was just really great to have like really good scene partners for all of that. That's a cool thing. Like going back to you know, how Kate isn't necessarily an archetypal popular girl, or Jeanette isn't necessarily an archetypal nerdy girl. You know, Jamie isn't your archetypal popular guy. You know, he's like he's through his wardrobe and the way that he expresses himself, he's very like, you know, he's in touch with his emotions. Actually, he's very sensitive, but at the same time he has these very like kind of toxically masculine attributes to him. And I think Tia Napolitano, our showrunner, wanted to kind of explore what that could look like in the 90s. And so I think Jamie is this really nuanced guy in the sense that he's like very emotionally intuitive, but at the same time, like very much disregards others' boundaries when it comes to like, I guess the emotional manipulation that he does in order to like retain some kind of control.
Yeah, I mean, I also loved the very, very small part, like, and hopefully we'll get more of like learning that Jimmy's mother is Hispanic when you guys speak in Spanish to each other. And, you know, was that something that like drew you to the character too because of your background? Like I'm Hispanic. And so it's just like, so nice to just see like thrown in there. Like you're like, oh, hey, cool. Like, and just you know, was great.
It's so funny because like, you know, I grew up in Texas, and I grew up to, my dad's an immigrant from Mexico, from Guadalajara, and my mom is American. And, you know, so I've always had a kind of bicultural background. You know, the great thing about the show is that it was super collaborative. So Jamie wasn't meant to be Latino. I phoned Tia, our showrunner, and I was like, hey, there's tons of Mexicans in Texas. There's tons of Latinos in Texas, even in the 90s. And like, it would be really cool if Jamie was Latino. And, you know, she put it in there, which was really, really cool. And, you know, like made him even more of like a rounded out character. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, no, I loved that moment because I was like, oh my gosh, I love representation. Great. What was it like, you know, working with Blake, especially once you learned like that, you know, I've only seen these first 4 episodes, but like, you know, once you know that he is behind kidnapping Kate, and you know, what was it like creating that dynamic and knowing that he's kind of this like villain?
Blake is just like the opposite of his character in
Yeah.
every way.
Literally.
Like Blake is like the most like bubbly, funny, like, you know, just like talkative, like hilarious, like always making jokes, like just like whatever you think Martin Harris is, like he is everything other than that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to watch for like, wait a minute, hold the phone. This is not the person I was just eating a churro with like 2 minutes ago. I'm so confused that there were churros on set one day with like, but yeah, I mean, I remember working with him and being like, wait a minute, this is very confusing. You're a totally different person. But creating kind of all of our relationships with him, for me at least, was super cool as a friend and as a.
There's like a quality about that he does with Martin though that makes him charming and that makes him interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's dark all of the time, which I think is why this happens. Why everybody's relationship with him is so specific, because he's this young, cool, hot principal who everybody kind of is like, he's new to town, he lives in this giant house, like there's something that's so interesting and charming about him. And I think that's why this dark layer that ends up unraveling is so frightening and so thrilling, because it's not what it seemed in the beginning. And I think that's such a massive theme of our show, is that nothing is quite as it seems, and he's definitely that. But yeah, I mean, like Chiara said, he's such a spectacular human that when we had to film those scenes where those dark layers did come out, the way he's so brilliant, and the way that he embodied Martin, especially when it came to those dark layers, was really intense and heavy, but he crushed it.
Well, that kind of gets into a question that I think is so I love so much about the show is it really kind of exists in this gray area. Like you mentioned, like he is so charming when your character and his are talking about like the star signs during the stars during the like hunting trip. And, you know, the show exists so much in this gray area where the ways you relate to these characters and these situations, there's not necessarily any sort of moral judgment. And I think that is really interesting because of so many of the things that happen. Like we could really hate Jamie for punching Jeanette, and we do, but then you know that there's something going on behind that we just haven't figured out yet about like the reasoning behind it. And, you know, how is it kind of like working on this show where all of your characters do like things that can be classified as horrible or bad, but the show never judges the characters for that. And I think it's a really interesting way, and in a way that you don't really see kind of exist in teen shows, I think, so often. Was that, you know, how was it kind of like working through that?
From my point of view, it's just like I get asked the question a lot, like, oh, from Vince's point of view, like, how does Vince look at these two girls? Or like, how do you view these two girls? And like, to me, it's so like heartbreaking because like when I think about it, like they were saying, like they just made choices as like curious teenage girls, you know, just going through things in life. And to me, it's just like perfect timing, like for everything. Like it just so happens that they just needed something out of life at the worst time, you know what I mean? With like the weirdest energy, you know, to like match it. And I think that no one is necessarily, like you can't really judge, you know what I mean, the things that they do because they're just, like I said, just curious teenage girls who were just making choices that just so happen to like snowball into like, you know, other things, especially Jeanette, who has never, you know, done things. And I think it's kind of like when people start gambling and then they go and then they hit and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna start gambling some more. And I think in Jeanette's case, it's like really screwed up because she just keeps hitting like hard. And then like, she doesn't really understand, like to me, from my point of view, from Vince's point of view, I'll say, it seems like she doesn't really understand consequence yet because she has just, you know what I mean, started to dabble into like all of these weird things and like she's not being held accountable for it until it becomes like such a crazy, like huge thing. And now she's like, what the hell? So you can't really judge that because like you have to ask yourself, does she really know? Like, does she know that like by falling in love with this guy, she's like doing something like terrible? Or like, does she know that, you know, by like just trying to be like, you know, like this other thing that this is causing like, you know, all these other reactions like around her that she has no idea about. But there's no way she can, you know what I mean? Because she's just a teenage girl. So you can't really hold judgment, you know what I mean? Because I don't know, she's innocent, you know, and ignorant to like all these things like around her.
I feel like this show is really special for a lot of reasons, but I feel like it's really cool because I don't think anyone will have the same opinion. Like you could be watching a show with your friend and like, for instance, at the premiere, my best friend was like, I'm Team Jeanette. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And so I got a little defensive, but I was like, sorry, Chiara, but I just feel like it's so interesting because everybody's going to have such a different opinion because every character makes a choice that could be, you know, considered questionable or wrong. But again, like Allius was saying, that we're teenagers. Like that's what teenagers do. They make questionable choices because they're figuring stuff out. You don't really know how yet to function in the world, or you're figuring it out. And the show is about them figuring it out in real time and making questionable choices that you see happen. And sometimes it works out and a lot of times it doesn't work out. And so yeah. I also think it's in a very good way uncomfortable because some of the things you see are very uncomfortable, and that's so real because being a teenager is the most uncomfortable thing in the world, and you're figuring out so much, and it's just cool to see all these characters who don't really know. They're still really just working things out, including like the adults, like Cindy Turner. she seems to be an absolute mess in the head. I don't know. I still think I feel like it's very
Olivia.
I don't know. I just feel like it's constipation. What?
Oh
Harley, who is Team Jeanette again? Sorry, what? Can you say again?
My best friend, other Olivia Maybank.
Make the bank.
She's Team Jeanette. I'm not on the same team as Ollie.
What?
Whoa.
Harlan?
Yikes.
No.
I mean,
Wow.
I guess we could probably just get into this question now because I do have that question. Do you guys, I mean, you guys know how this all shakes out. Do you have a side? Are you Jeanette or Kate?
I mean, I can't not be. I don't have a choice in the matter. Like, it's not an offense. Like, I just think I've been in Jeanette's world so much. I have to be Team Jeanette. I don't have a choice. And I'm like a victim to the story.
It's like and this is how we were when filming the show, because we didn't know the trajectory.
Yeah.
We didn't know the ending as we were filming the first season. But I think what Harley said, like, your opinion changes. And
Totally.
every script that we would get, we would all call each other and be like, what do you think happens? Like, it's so fun. Like, that's what makes the show so interesting. And you get to have those conversations with people, and it's so fascinating, like, how different people's opinions are. And my theory was very wrong from the beginning. But it's fun. Like, you get to like find out if you were right or wrong in each episode. Like, there are clues that like bring you further to the truth. And I think that's what makes just the conversation so exciting, is you get to actually like have an opinion about the show, and it's going to be forever changing. Or some people might be like, this is what happens, and like they stick through it through the entire season. It's fun.
I think it's
You'd be so smart.
I know.
Same.
I think it'll change every episode. I think everyone's opinions are going to change a lot.
I also think it's fascinating. I think it's super fascinating too that like our show, it's scripted, but it's kind of following this like episodic true crime thing, right? And the whole show is about like true crime journalism in a way. And like it's kind of encouraging the audience to speculate and think about the characters and who's at fault and who's to blame. But like in real life and in the show, like whenever you're opening a case of true crime and you're reporting on it, there are innocent people whose dirty laundry will be aired out. There's people who are like, will be suspected to be a murderer, and that follows them their whole life, regardless of whether or not they did it. So it's like, that's literally what is happening in the show. You're seeing people's lives kind of being messed up just by the search for truth. And so in a way, it's like, in a kind of meta way, it's kind of making you analyze your own role and like in the misery of these people. Cause it's not just about one or two people. It's like this is a whole town of like traumatized kids because of this event.
It's a whole town of traumatized kids. What's Cruel Summer about?
I mean, I feel like
it's a whole town of traumatized kids.
Yeah, I mean, another question I have is like, I think the show really explores the way that trauma can like obviously reshape people, and on like, an individual level. But I think as you watch, like, especially with the episode, they might cut. I don't want to spoil too much, but with the hunting episode, like, you see the ways that trauma literally has affected the entire community, and the fallout of, Kate's kidnapping and, like recovery and everything, and it's something that I think is explored, but not necessarily explored well all the time. And how is it watching like your characters change as trauma changed them throughout these summers, and the ways that you interacted with other people, like and interacted with the other characters on set, like, and especially I think that shines so much through like the family dynamics too, like, which we still don't even know the ins and outs of yet.
I don't know. I think like one thing that I love about what this show does is it doesn't glamorize any of the things that we highlight. From the relationships to the trauma to the darkest moments to even the lightest ones, like there's no glamorizing like what has happened in this town. And I think that this is speaking for me and like the relationship that Kate has with the people in this town. I think after what happens, I think like she has a lot of misplaced guilt, but ultimately everybody had some sort of responsibility. And I don't think that everyone is making that clear to her or to themselves even. And so I think in that particular episode that you're talking about, especially when they're around the campfire and she's telling this story, I think that it's sort of a slap in the face. Like this could have been, no one was paying attention. No one was doing anything about anything. Everyone was too invested and involved in themselves to recognize that there was something wrong going on here from the beginning. And I think that in that moment, like that is her explaining everybody's responsibility in this situation.
Yeah. For me, it was like, Jamie has done some pretty bad things and, he's traumatized, but in his journey, it's like, how do you recover from it when you're the toxic one? That like, how do you make amends to people? And in the same way, like Olivia was talking about how it's not really glamorized, the whole recovery bit, the whole process of making things better. There's not like one thing that anyone can do to just fix things. Like it's always going to be different, and sometimes you can't fix a relationship. Sometimes you have to say goodbye to it. Sometimes you just do something you can't come back from.
You also get to see the people around the traumatized person react to their trauma. And I think like there are, personally, in my opinion, I think there are for sure right and wrong ways to react to somebody's trauma and to be supportive of that person. And I think the show displays very incorrect ways to deal with somebody's trauma, and then much more supportive ways. It just shows varying levels of appropriate ways to deal with somebody's trauma.
Like that's the other thing, for all of you, is it seems like each episode you get to pull back another layer of these characters. Was that something, how was that? Like, because you just learned so much about them, like almost piecemeal too. Like, I'm sure, you guys mentioned that you didn't know what was going to happen next until you got that script. Was it exciting learning these new, like, kind of revelations each week?
It was challenging in some ways, but also it made it exciting to receive each script. It was like you checked your email and then you were immediately like, it's here. And then,
do you remember receiving 110, Harley, or the days preceding receiving?
I started to threaten people. I was like, you're damaging my mental health if you don't send 110. I can't.
No,
I can't sleep.
It was insane. Harley and I were on the phone like maybe all the time. Oh, it was me, Olivia, and Harley. We would text each other and we would go, "It's in," and we'd be messing with the other one, and then they'd check their emails and be like, I hate you.
That was the weirdest thing in my life.
No, but you actually did that to me multiple times. Harley and Olivia's the only one I think who successfully did it because we didn't expect it from her. And then we went and we were like, oh my God, it's not actually here. And it took like 3 more days. And I think Harley wanted to maybe murder me. It was not.
I did. It was hard. It was challenging.
Vince has a really beautiful moment in episode 3 that's like a big reveal for his character, for the character moving forward. Was it like taping that moment, and what do you feel like it means for the character moving forward?
Now we're getting the chance to actually do the job and show up and actually do what you've been looking forward to do, especially when you get the script and you see how magical of a moment it's scripted to be, and then to get to see it in real life after that. I don't know, there's so many levels to it.
What are you excited about audiences kind of getting from the show when it premieres? How do you feel about, I think you're going to get inevitable Pretty Little Liars comparisons, just because I think Freeform hasn't necessarily had a show in this vein since Pretty Little Liars, and I think people are really hungry for that. You know, what are you looking forward to once it's out here in the world?
I am looking forward to the whole world being able to see how fabulous Harley, Allius, Froy, and Olivia are. I think it's going to be really fun for them because I enjoy hanging out and watching these people interact myself. So I think that like maybe the whole world will potentially enjoy it as much as I do, which would be a lot. So I'm super excited for that. Yeah.
This thing happens to me where I like if I talk about Chiara's performance in the pilot,
I start crying.
My
God.
No,
she's not lying. I have a 2-minute video of her crying about that. It's so beautiful though. It's so beautiful.
I like even when I just can't. Even when I'm talking to anybody, I'm like. But so I'm just like and that's how I genuinely feel about every actor on the show. I loved getting to see everybody. My heart's beating all fast now. I love to see everybody do their thing, and you know, I think like playing 3 different years of a character is the most beautiful and greatest challenge, and to see everybody take that on, because it could for sure. You can mess it up, but nobody in the show messed it up. Like it's a great challenge. One of the greatest I've ever seen as an actor, and with all the projects I've auditioned for and everything, I've never seen something this wonderful of an opportunity. So to see everybody absolutely just crush it, I just can't wait for the world to be able to see everybody display their talents in the most incredible way. And like, I'll cry every episode over somebody because in all the episodes I've seen, I've cried every time. Episodes I've seen multiple times. I still cry every time. I still cry at the end of 2. I still cry at the beginning. So I just can't wait for everybody to see everyone on this show.
And I'm mad about it. I have really strong feelings because my makeup.
Well, you know,
nice,
the amount of times I cried over you can cry for me.
I think I'm just so excited for people like Harley invest themselves in this show because but in the, and I mean that in the best way. Like,
no, I'm the show's biggest fan. Continue.
But like you are PR. Harley's our PR.
Yeah.
But I really think like if you're a fan of this genre, you're gonna love it. There is an element of it that you're going to fall in love with. And I think you really are going to invest yourself in this show and in these characters. And I'm excited for the conversation behind this show and for people to start forming opinions and coming up with theories. I'm excited to see that conversation and for people to just be transported
Harley
back in time.
is not Team Turner. And I will never get over it.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Be sure to check out Cruel Summer on Freeform and Hulu immediately. And I hope to see everybody tweeting about it because I need everybody's theories immediately. And thanks to the wonderful cast for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.